welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your girl Tino, but you can call me Tino. You know what we do here? We keep it real, we keep it classy, we keep it entertaining, period. It's not a mistake that you clicked on this video. It means you've been studying countless hours and haven't been getting the results, or you've been getting the results but you know you can do better. And let me tell you, you've come to the right channel. These methods that I'm sharing and everything I'm saying here does not just pertain to medical students or university students. It pertains to anyone, whether you're in high school, uni, you're doing what type of course. I'm sure this will help you. Just give it a listen. You've clicked on the right video. If you're looking for shortcuts or hacks on how to study, or like the short way to study, then you are on the wrong channel. There is no way to study without actually studying. But I'm here to help you guys to study efficiently and study smart. Let's get a bit scientific for a moment and let's understand what makes people forget information, because we're struggling with retaining information. That's why we're failing so much. It's this thing called the forgetting curve that was discovered by Ebbinghaus. Conclusions of the experiment show that the first few minutes of learning something, that's when you forget most of the things. You can go and check it out on the internet. When you learn a new piece of information, after 20 minutes, 60% of that information that you'd have learned will be retained, meaning you've already forgotten 40%, just in 20 minutes. And in a day, you can only remember 30%. If a week passes by, you only remember 20%. You forget the most information straight after learning. As time progresses, the decline in the retaining of information is gradual. So you can't not forget. So what you have to do now is try and make your retaining capabilities better. And how do you make your retaining capabilities better? There are a lot of studies that were done, and this is scientifically proven. By the way, I know we're adamant to new information. People don't easily like to take new ideas. Just because what you've been doing is working for you doesn't mean this might not work. This has been experimented on. There's data upon data of how much this method works. You could be getting good grades doing your own method. I'm not saying you're doing it wrong, but maybe you're working too much and it's unnecessary. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm not saying I get exceptional grades. I could be if I was following this method religiously. As I'm telling you about this method, I'm also reminding myself. There's something called spaced repetition. I'm sure everyone and anyone has been talking about it on YouTube, or maybe this is your first time hearing about it. What spaced repetition means is that you review the information you'd have learned in gradual intervals. These are increasing intervals to help you retain information better. So what we're trying to do essentially is to halt this forgetting curve. We're trying to lessen the amount of information that is forgotten by recalling it straight after doing it, an hour after doing it, 5 months after doing it, etc. There are a lot of apps that can help you with spaced repetition. There's Anki, there's Quizlet. There could be many other apps I don't know of anyway, but I personally don't use apps. Not that they're bad or whatever. I'm just not tech savvy. I like writing. I like seeing my things. I like touching my stuff. Let me get into how you can apply spaced repetition into everything you do. Isn't lecturers give you lecture slides or PDFs, or you can use a textbook. Let's say, for example, you're studying hematology. You're given lecture slides, right? You make questions from your lecture slides. This is what I do. I physically write in my book. I'll give you an example after I've explained thoroughly what I do. I will show you visually what I do. I open up a slide and I read, understand, make questions as I go through the slides. Let's say the first slide says definition of hematology. My first question would be, what is hematology? I'm asking myself as I'm studying, I'm writing down the notes on hematology. The next slide, I also put questions I ask myself as I study. So when I compile those questions, I come back later, like an hour later or 2 hours later, and I try and attempt those questions without referring back to my slides or to the textbook or whatever. I take a separate paper or the same book or whatever, and then I start answering those questions I would have asked myself 2 hours prior. Answer the questions on paper, try as much to recall, And when I'm done, I then open the slides and then go back and mark myself correct or wrong. After I've reviewed the questions, I do put answers, correct myself on that sheet of paper. I go to the book and then I color code them according to how difficult I would have found the questions to be. If they were easy, if I just wrote the answer like in 2 minutes, I shaded green. If it was hard for me, if I couldn't recall anything at all, I shaded pink or red. Well, it should be red, but I don't have a red highlighter. And if it was somewhat, I was figuring it out here and there, but something was getting lost in translation, or I had an idea but not quite, I put the color orange, so that when I go back to them a day later, I start attempting the phone started overheating and I'd been talking for hours. I was talking about how I color code the questions according to how difficult I find them to be. So red or pink, because I don't have a red highlighter, signifies that I found it very difficult. I couldn't recall anything at all. Green was easy, I recalled it very fast. And then amber, which is orange really, it means I somehow knew something but couldn't actually put it across properly or correctly. So what I do is when I review them, I start doing the ones that are color coded red because they're the ones that I found the most difficult, and rarely do I go back to the green ones, but I do so like after a while. So I keep on doing these ones that are shaded orange and red until they're shaded green, right? Or they might never be shaded green. That way you're challenging your forgetting curve because you're doing it regularly, you're recalling, and you retain information better. For those that would not want to do it physically, like writing down and everything, that find it tedious, or that just like to use their devices, you can download the apps. Anki, there's Mesmerize, there's Quizlet. I think out of these three, I would give Anki a 5 out of 5. You know why? Because it will space the repetition for you. Everything is automated. As you answer questions, as you flag them difficult, easy, or whatever, it will space them out for you. Like when you do the questions, it will bring the ones that you found more difficult, and it will schedule when you should revise the things for you. It will remind you, you set all these settings, and then everything is just done for you. How amazing is technology, right? And if I had an iPad, I would definitely use Anki. You can also use Quizlet. Quizlet doesn't do the space repetition like Anki does. And then Mesmerize, I'm not quite sure how it works, but I just know it does this whole flashcard thingy. So for like devices, like how you make a flashcard, you just write the question and the answer at the back, paste and copy into the app, and from your lecture slides or your textbook, and then voila, you start revising them after a day, after hours, after weeks, and then you'll see that your life will change. I'm not even clickbaiting, I'm not even lying to you. Try this method and you'll tell me the truth. Right now I'm going to actually show you what I was talking about, like how I actually write the questions and everything from the slides and the textbooks on paper, and how I color code them. So let's get into that.
For the purposes of this video, I'm going to be using this biochemistry slide on post-transcriptional processing. Under post-transcriptional modifications, the first line says, the RNA produced during transcription are called primary transcripts. So if I understand that line, I put a question down, written, what are the RNAs produced in transcription called? And I move on to the second question. If the second line is of importance, I also make a question from the second line. And in this case, the question would be, what alterations or modifications does the RNA go through? And I do so for the remainder of the slides and compile my questions. And then after some time, I attempt to answer them on a separate piece of paper without looking back to my slides. As I'm answering these questions, I'm also correcting myself on that paper and color coding the questions according to how difficult I would have found them to be. And as you will see in the next paper, most of them are green and a few are orange, meaning I understood the information well. Maybe it's because I did it straight after reading.
Another thing you need to put into practice when you're studying is that you need to study to understand, not to finish. There are many times you spend 9 hours in the library and you say you've read all the slides or everything, you finished the whole textbook. But what did you actually understand? You need to read to understand, not to just memorize. Because after the forgetting curve has done its thing and you just crammed and you don't even have fragments or bits of pieces of understanding as to what you were studying, then you've wasted your time and then you're gonna get nothing in return. When you understand something, you might not reproduce the way you read it, but you reproduce in the way you understand, it will still be correct. If you're asked what is hematology, there is a textbook definition. If you memorize it, if you miss a word on that sentence, everything is gone. Everything runs from your brain. But if you understand what hematology is, even if you can't remember word to word, because you have an understanding of what it is, you will put your own definition, which is correct, but in your own words. Overall, what you need to do is understand, because with understanding, you gain more. Memorizing can only take you so far. Understanding will carry you throughout your entire life. Because there are things when you understand, you have that understanding for life. But when you memorize, the moment it vanishes, it's gone. So read to understand, not reading to memorize. I hope you get that. Have a study partner or have a study group. When I'm doing discussions with my study partner or my study group, I recall more. I'll be in the exam, right? And the question comes and I just recall a friend of mine telling me about that certain thing, or I recall the moment I said the wrong answer and then I was corrected or something. It's better to recall when you've interacted with people before than just sitting by your desk, studying by yourself. You might be lying to yourself and you never know that. So discussing and having study partners opens your mind, because there's a way, you know when you're studying, sometimes you understand things wrongly. You convince yourself that what you're understanding is correct when it's not. So when you have a study partner or you have study groups, you get to hear people's input on what you thought you understood, and maybe you ultimately discover that you understood nothing. You were totally going south when everyone was going north. What you should do again in order to excel is revise past papers. I like what my anatomy lecturer said. You have to get into your lecturer's brain. Think like him when you're answering questions, and think to yourself, if I were him or if I were her, how would I answer this question? Get into their heads, answer how they probably would want you to answer. There's passive learning and there's active learning. When you're just making notes and notes after notes and you're just reading those notes, there is just passive learning, and you can only get much from passive learning. But actively recalling gets you far. I'm not saying stop making notes. Do what you want, boo. But when you make your notes, ask yourself questions as well. After studying a chapter, do the questions at the end of the chapter. Find questions somewhere, attempt those questions. That way you're actively recalling and you're improving your brain's efficiency. Because if you're just reading notes, your brain isn't working as much as it should. But if you're asking yourself, your brain will crack as you try to recall what you would have read. And that's actively studying, actively recalling. It has better efficiency, better rates of retaining information, and better rates of recalling them over time. What I'm ultimately saying is that please study actively. Engage your brain in your study. I promise you, your results will change. As I close this video, what I just want to say is that it all starts with you. What you have to do is change your mindset. The moment you change your mindset and tell yourself this is your time to shine, and you actively engage your mind in what you are about to do. If you change your mindset, if you've been failing continuously and you tell yourself this is the time to work and we're going to achieve this, you will. Change your mindset, set goals, make a timetable, and then pull through. Because how then do you attain your goals if you are not actively working towards it. When you set your goals, when you change your mindset, now comes the work towards your goals. I wish you all the best in your studies. May we all excel. From now on, we're gonna be excellent. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. Until my next video, sending love and light. Peace.